Hello and welcome to the Evo India YouTube channel, and say hello to the Kawasaki KLX 230.
Do it like that. Do it like that.
Now this is the first small capacity road legal dirt bike that Kawasaki has brought for sale in India, and in this first ride review I'm going to be telling you whether or not you should consider getting one, who it's for, and whether it deserves the rupees 3,30,000 ex-showroom asking price. But before we proceed, don't forget to like this video, share it with like-minded enthusiasts, and smash that bell icon for all things thrill of riding. Let's kick things off with the design of this motorcycle, and as you can see, this is a proper dirt bike. There have no corners been cut to make it more friendly or forgiving for the road, neither in terms of its form, neither in the way it looks. It looks like a proper dirt bike. It belongs to the rest of the family of Kawasaki's off-roaders, right from the smallest one to the biggest one. So you have very similar styling cues to all those bikes, with this front LED headlamp, this tall green fender, the shrouds that go around the tank and the frame, and this long seat, the bench style seat that you get for off-road motorcycles. You also have your exhaust mounted pretty high up, and I really like this color scheme. There's also another color scheme which I'm not particularly fond of, that will be on your screen right now, but of the two I would pick this 10 times out of 10. And as you can see, it has this nice KLX 230 badging. The color of the frame goes really well with the green, and all in all it's a stunning looking motorcycle. And as you can see, it is pretty tall as well, with this 880mm seat height, but more on that a little later.
And you know, he be riding on the wave. I ain't got a lot to say. Mine's heavy, give me space. Pine's ready, let me blaze. Spend money, what a waste. Time's money, money pays. You ain't ready for the eighth. She ain't ready for the eighth. He be riding on the wave. I ain't got a lot to say. Mine's heavy, give me space. Pine's ready, let me blaze. Spend money, what a waste. Time's money, money pays. You ain't ready for the eighth.
Now let's talk about the heart of the matter, the engine. Now powering it is a 233cc air-cooled engine. It's a single-cylinder unit, and the output figures are 17.8 bhp at 8,000 rpm and 18.3 Newton meters of torque at 6,400 rpm, and this engine is mated to a 6-speed gearbox. Now you might think that these figures are a little too modest, and a 230cc engine should be developing a lot more power, and in most cases I would agree, but this is a proper case of the spec sheet saying one thing and the actual riding saying another. Because the 18 horsepower, rough horsepower that this makes, it is delivered in a very aggressive manner. The throttle turn is fairly short, and the throttle tune is also pretty aggressive, which means you have access to a lot of the power and torque pretty early on, making it feel quite snappy and fun to play around with. And in terms of the speeds that you can do on the highway, at one point of time I was seeing around 122 kmph on the dash. Now that was close to red line. I can't really say because the instrument cluster doesn't have a tachometer, but it did feel like it was close to the red line. But doing 80 to 95 kmph is a very reasonable ask from this engine, and at that point of time it's very relaxed, very stress-free, and you can sit there for hours on end. Well, I say hours and not days, because this is a fairly small 7.6 litre fuel tank, so you will have to stop for fuel pretty often. Talking about the rideability that this engine has to offer, like I already said, it's good on the highway. You can do reasonable highway speeds on the motorcycle, but where you're really going to be riding this is off-road. Now the ratios, they're pretty tall and they're pretty closely spaced as well, so that means you can carry each gear for a considerable amount of time. And when you're riding off-road, when you're doing tricky slow speed stuff and you don't want to change to many gears, this is where the engine really shines. It can hold the gear well. The power band is fairly wide, so there is enough grunt, so you can carry enough speed without needing to make a shift. And when you do want to make a shift, that 6-speed gearbox, it's very tactile, it's very crisp, and you know exactly what you're doing with it. And this is despite not having a gear position indicator, something that we have been spoilt with in the last few years, with every bike getting one. So it's a bit of a oddball that this doesn't get one, but I think the way the gears are calibrated and how communicative the gear lever is, it's not a big problem. Now riding off-road, like I said, it has enough grunt. You can actually even get a wheel up in first gear 17-18 horsepower is not something you'd really expect a bike to pop a wheelie very easily, but this has more than enough grunt to do that, and that is also down to the calibration, like I said. So it's not really a horsepower numbers game over here, it's more the calibration and the tune of the engine, and Kawasaki has done a stellar job with this. It's even actually fun to commute with, but I'll get to that in a bit because there's a lot about the ergonomics I want to talk about as to why it's fun to ride in the city. Now, apart from that, in terms of refinement, this isn't the most refined motorcycle. It does sound a little gruff. There are a few vibrations here and there, but that's not really much of a problem. It's not the kind of vibrations that will render you numb and tingly, but it is there, and it does remind you that you are, after all, riding a high compression, high performance internal combustion engine. And while we're at it, why don't I also give you a quick exhaust note check. So there you have it. This is what I meant by saying that the engine does feel a little gruff. This isn't something that people are going to turn back twice and look at what's passing by. It's very sedate, it's very unassuming. You're not really putting on a show for other people. Now let's talk about the ergonomics and the ride and handling, and the first thing I want to address is the seat height. Now this has an 880mm seat height, and that's a result of wrong travel suspension and tall ground clearance. But what does that mean for you as a rider? As you can see, I'm 5 feet 10 and the seat is coming all the way up till my hips, so that is pretty intimidating when you think about it. But when you actually swing a leg over and get the bike off the side stand, you can see that the suspension setup is so soft that it just goes down nicely, and it's allowing me to flat foot comfortably with a kink in my leg very, very comfortably. Now granted, I am heavy, I am just a little off the weight of the motorcycle, so you take your guess what that is. But lighter riders as well, when they sat on it, it goes in very nicely, allowing them to put at least one foot down, giving them that confidence that they are in control of the motorcycle even when it's at standstill or riding slowly. That being said, it damps very well, so just because it's soft doesn't mean it's going to bottom out if you go over harder or taller obstacles. As you can see, there's still a fair bit of ground clearance left to use, and suspension travel as well. There's a lot of it that is still left for me to use with my weight. So if you are significantly lighter than me, you have even more to play with, and that's just the beauty of the suspension setup. Now speaking about the suspension setup, this is a 37mm Showa telescopic fork setup at the front, and that offers 240mm of field travel. At the rear, you have a preload adjustable unitrack monoshock, which is preload adjustable and offers 250mm of travel, and the static ground clearance when my fat self is not on it is 265mm. So that is a lot. Those are big numbers, which also does contribute to the seat height, but like I said, the seat height is really not a problem whatsoever. Now coming back to the suspension, the way it handles stuff is really great, and this is what I was talking about, handling city traffic. Now if you've been to Pune in the recent past, you'd know that the roads are a nightmare. It's just construction work after construction work. You turn off one lane, you're just reaching another patch of massive construction, which means a lot of potholes, a lot of bad roads, imperfections in the road. Even great highways have bad surfaces, and this just takes everything in its stride. It's also down to the travel, but also the way the suspension damps. It's very responsive, and it, in most cases, any bad undulation, it just absorbs to a point where you don't even feel it. Some harsher bumps will translate, but again, the translation that you feel is not of a harsh bump that's going to unsettle the bike whatsoever. And this is why I really appreciate riding this bike in the city. And like I said, because the seat height is a non-issue for me, it becomes that much more fun because you're just that much faster than traffic when you're on a motorcycle like this. Now when you come off-road to a place like this is where this bike really starts to shine, and the best part about it is just how forgiving it is. It's a very beginner friendly motorcycle, but at the same time it also has enough to keep an experienced rider entertained. That 18 horsepower, like I said, more than that, the tune of the throttle and the calibration of the engine and the gearbox, it allows you to have a lot of fun. You don't ever feel like the bike is so underpowered that you're aching for a lot more power. I feel if you are a beginner and you get this bike, you do not need to do anything to the motorcycle. Keep it bone stock and you should get at least a year's performance out of it without needing riding upgrades. The only real upgrade I would suggest is changing the tires to a more hardcore or more focused off-road tire setup if off-roading is your primary agenda with this bike, and in all honesty, this bike is meant for just that. Now, rounding off the chassis setup is a perimeter frame and the braking setup, which consists of a 270mm disc at the front with a twin piston caliper and a 220mm disc at the rear with a single piston caliper. Now, the braking performance is solid, and it's the sort of braking performance that works optimally on the road and off-road as well. Now, of course, you're not going to have naked bike levels of braking performance on the road, and you really don't want that, because when you come off-road, you need to be able to modulate and play with the brake lever to get as much braking as you want when you want, by controlling how much you pull the lever in and not all of it as soon as you tap it. So that calibration is done very well, and on the streets also, it doesn't have too sharp a setup where if you grab a handful of the brakes, you're just using up all the travel of the suspension. Yes, it does pitch and yaw quite a bit, but it's very controllable and manageable. And speaking of riding in the city, the seat is not the best. I mean, it's meant for riding off-road, so you do have that, so you need to sit up. Yeah, it's not a great place for the pillion, it's not a great place for you as well, but it is comfortable enough that you can actually ride this from your house or wherever. Now, the same seat you will appreciate a lot when you come off-road because of the narrowness and the length of it. You can move around very comfortably. You can come all the way up if your riding demands that. You can go all the way behind if you're doing jumps or any of that, and it is really flexible. It's a really great setup. The perimeter frame with that suspension setup, it works exceptionally well off-road, and this is something you will cherish for a long time to come. Now let's talk about the features on this motorcycle, and this is going to be a relatively small segment because the features on this motorcycle are very few. You have a very basic negatively lit LCD screen that shows you the bare minimum information. You have your speed, you have a odometer and a trip meter, you have your clock, and you have a fuel gauge. That's about it. There's also a small cutout which, when you pair your phone, will show you some level of information, but that's about it. It misses out on two crucial features that I feel are a gear position indicator and a tachometer. These two not being present in an instrument cluster in 2025 is a big miss in my opinion. Apart from that, you have dual channel ABS, which you can disengage by just long pressing this red button over here. Once it gets disengaged, all you have to do is press it once to switch it back on. The only thing you need to note is that this you can do only while you're at a standstill, and apart from that, the other feature that you get is an LED headlight. So now that I've told you what it is like to ride the Kawasaki KLX 230, should you be getting one? Well, the ex-showroom asking price for this is 3,30,000. Now that is a lot of money, and it is a lot of money for most people. But the KLX is for a very specific set of people, one that really want to go off-road and really do that in a lot of style. Now the KLX 230, the biggest brownie point that I can give it is the fact that it is road legal, which means you don't need an expensive truck to mount your bike and get it to wherever you want to go. You can ride it on the streets and you will have a relatively enjoyable time doing so. And when you do come off-road, it has a lot of potential to keep a beginner as well as an experienced rider entertained. Yes, 3,30,000 is a lot, but you also have to bear in mind that you are paying for that Kawasaki badge as well. And with that comes a lot of reliability, something that will be robust, last a long time, and do very well for what it is meant to be. So for those people, I feel like the KLX 230 is a very good buy. But for everyone else, there are always options like the Hero X-Pulse 200 and very soon the X-Pulse 210, and if you don't want to spend that kind of money, you do have very competent offerings. But if you are willing to spend out a little extra money, that little green thing will leave you with a big smile on your face.